Tonight, I'd like you to give a very warm welcome to PW Crack.
Thank you, Heidi, Bruce, and all the other organizers. I'm honored and humbled to be giving this talk. Good afternoon, ShmooCon. The theme of this year's ShmooCon is commencement, a new beginning. A commencement isn't an end. It is closing a door on one chapter and opening a door on another chapter. It is a time of transition. So it is fitting that we take some time to reflect on our roots, where we came from, how we got here, what makes us special, and maybe a little bit about where we're going. I've always been passionate about hacker culture, so I'm excited to be giving this talk today. First, a little bit about me. I'm currently Principal Security Engineer at Warcaller. I'm the former head of Information Security for OpenVPN. I'm the Speaker Operations and CFP Lead Goon for DEF CON. I'm a longtime member of Nova Hackers and Unallocated Space, and I'm a former co-chair of B-Sides DC. Always feel free to reach out to me through any channel, email, Blue Sky, LinkedIn, or phone, if I can help with anything, or if you just want to chat. I love talking to everyone in our community. I love being a part of our hacker community, and it's a big part of who I am. A couple of jobs ago, in 2012, I was working on the Bank of America Red Team on a password cracking project. I was required to show up in person in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I rented a bedroom and was commuting by air from BWI during the week. After work, I started showing up at Hackerspace Charlotte. I did a talk there about rainbow tables, but also met a bunch of really great hackers: Ben, Red, Amelia, Quincy, and a number of others. Even though I was a complete rando, they welcomed me into their hacker family. While we were hanging out one night, I started to describe to Ben that there wasn't really good software to break Enigma messages without the key. For every other crypto system up to that point, you could identify a piece of software that would encrypt and decrypt, and you could mathematically describe the complexity and weaknesses of the system. Then there was also a piece of software that would leverage the weaknesses and break the encryption, but not Enigma. There were software emulators of Enigma, and some of them actually worked properly, and I could describe the machine in detail, including the weaknesses of the system, and how Polish cryptographer Rejewski and Alan Turing had broken the system in the 40s. But there was no available software on my laptop that could decrypt an Enigma message without the key. How can this be? This was broken 70 years ago. So Ben pulls out his laptop and he starts asking me questions about how the Enigma works. I start describing the machine in detail. There are rotors, a reflector, rings, notches, plug board, starting positions, etc. The next day, Ben and I talked and agreed to collaborate on writing a piece of software that would decrypt Enigma messages without the key. We were able to do it using a really innovative technique that Ben came up with, and it broke the Enigma in a completely different way. The software worked brilliantly, and we eventually gave a talk about the software and the technique at 4.4Con in London on the 100th anniversary of Turing's birth. Ben and I also made a pilgrimage to Bletchley Park. It was a great trip. Some guys from South Africa were in London, and they saw the talk. They invited Ben and I to give the talk in South Africa at another conference. After that conference, the organizers took a group of international speakers on a multi-day safari. It was a second fantastic trip. Ben is an ideas guy and a friend. We have kept in touch. One of Ben's friends is James Yonan, who is the CTO and co-founder of OpenVPN and wrote the original software 22 years ago. When OpenVPN was looking for a head of information security, it was Ben who first suggested my name. All of those things happened because I just showed up at Hackerspace Charlotte and made some new hacker friends. Let's talk about a few people that I think embody the hacker ethic. Let me take you back to 1812. A 20-year-old apprentice bookbinder with limited education spends his spare time reading the books that he binds. He is fascinated by science and electricity and builds do-it-yourself batteries in the back of the bookstore. A customer of the bookshop asked the youngster if he would like tickets to hear Sir Humphrey Davy lecture at the Royal Institution. Sir Humphrey Davy is one of the most famous and accomplished scientists in the world. Of course, he wants the ticket. He takes notes and then makes additions to the notes and produces a 300-page handwritten book, which he binds and sends to Davy. Davy is impressed with the quality and detail of the notes. The next year, Davy's eyesight is damaged during an experiment with nitrogen trichloride. Recognizing that he needs help to continue his work, he hires the apprentice as a chemical assistant at the Royal Institution on March 1, 1813. The new assistant is Michael Faraday. Faraday's job involves working with nitrogen trichloride, the explosive which has already injured Davy. Faraday himself is briefly knocked unconscious by another explosion, and when Davy is again injured, they put an end to work with this particular substance. Faraday is not considered a gentleman in English society, and from 1813 to 1815, he travels the continent with Davy as his valet until a replacement could be found. Although miserable in his position, Faraday meets many great scientists during the trip, including Ampere in Paris and Volta in Milan. Because he was self-trained, however, he has no grasp of the mathematics and cannot understand a word of Ampere's papers. Faraday witnesses Davy's early work with electricity, and Davy challenges him to see if he can do better. Faraday publishes work on electromagnetic rotation, the principle behind the electric motor, discovered electromagnetic induction, the principle behind the electric transformer and generator, and formulated the second law of electrolysis. He gave his name to the farad, originally describing a unit of electrical charge, but later a unit of electrical capacitance. Of course, he invented the Faraday cage. One of the most important contributions to physics was his development of the concept of a field to describe magnetic and electric forces. Now, Davy had asked Faraday to research the production of optical glass. At the time, English optics were inferior to German optics, which are critical to astronomic observations. Faraday spent over 4 years exhaustively experimenting with the production of optical glass. He rigorously varied every element of the production. The work was tedious, but Faraday was obsessive and tried to examine every conceivable facet in an attempt to uncover anything of consequence. While the effort was ultimately a failure, Faraday demonstrated an ability to attack a subject, and by the end of his career, Faraday would document over 30,000 experiments. I was having drinks with a neighbor of mine who was a pilot. I was telling him that my day-to-day work experience as a penetration tester was one of failing every day, sometimes for months at a time, to get a particular exploit to work, and then one day, getting it to succeed, at which point we would write it up and start all over again. My daily life was consistently failing and sometimes succeeding. He told me that his experience was the exact opposite. Day to day, the pilot would take off and land successfully. They almost never failed. His daily life was consistently succeeding, and if they failed, there would be an investigation and a board review. It struck me that we're a special type who can deal with failure as a normal situation and continue to be tenacious. The key hacking skill is the ability to know when your failures are creating progress and when your failures are just wasting time. I remember an assessment I was doing at a different job. I was working on this thing for about 6 months and I couldn't get it to work exactly right. My boss would come to my cubicle and ask me if I was finished. I told him that I wasn't, but I was still progressing. Eventually, I was able to get the exploit to work, and it was a successful assessment, at least from the perspective of the red team. We need to normalize failure. It has been suggested that we should solicit and accept talks about experiments or exploits that failed. I'm not sure those would be interesting talks, but let's understand that that happens all the time, and if we're learning, we're succeeding. At that same job I just mentioned, I also screwed up a report. I made a typo which overstated the severity of an issue by an order of magnitude. The report had gone to senior leadership, so it was a big deal. When we realized the error, I took responsibility for the issue, and that allowed the team to correct it and move forward. The team created an award for me called the Blue Screw. It was a wooden base, and it has a giant blue-colored screw partially screwed into it, and I had to keep it on my desk. Later, when someone else on the team screwed up, we passed the award around with the most recent screw-up having to display the award at their desk. Nobody wanted this thing on their desk. But we understood that screw-ups happen and that the only way to move forward was to acknowledge these, take responsibility, and correct them. We normalized taking responsibility. This year, CrowdStrike won the Pony Award for most epic fail. The president of CrowdStrike, Mike Santonis, showed up at DEF CON to accept the award in person and vowed to display the trophy prominently at CrowdStrike. He owned it and took responsibility. That guy gets it. With limited formal education, and despite almost blowing himself up, Faraday was a tenacious experimentalist. He was responsible for foundational research on electricity. Michael Faraday initiated the annual Royal Institution Christmas Lectures in 1825. The Christmas lectures present scientific subjects to a general audience, including young people, in an informative and entertaining manner. Faraday invented TED Talks and presented 19 of these. London, 1851. The middle class, with property to protect, is obsessed with security and patent locks. A journalist visiting London describes a mania for fortification. The British Empire is at its peak of world economic domination, including the safe and lock industry. London hosts the Great Exhibition of 1851 at the Crystal Palace. 2 locks top the list of Britain's most secure: the Brahma Precision and the Chubb Detector. On the other side of the Atlantic, an unknown locksmith prepares for his passage to London. He will represent his employer, Day & Newell, an American lock company who is promoting its own locks at the Great Exhibition. Among his luggage is a collection of lockpicking tools and a letter of reference from the New York City Chief of Police to help ease his passage through customs. The locksmith, Alfred C. Hobbs, has learned that the best way to sell a lock is to demonstrate the weaknesses of its competitors. Brahma & Company is offering a bug bounty of 200 guineas for anyone who can pick the precision lock. It is agreed that he will have a month to do it. Hobbs has also challenged Chubb and its detector lock. The detector is the de facto standard for high security locks around the world at this time. Hobbs invites Chubb and the press to witness the attempt. Given the numerous previous failed attempts to pick the lock, the invitation to Chubb does not excite them. But they send a representative anyway. At the appointed time, Hobbs produces some tools from his pocket and proceeded to pick the lock. 25 minutes later, the lock clicked open. The witnesses asked Hobbs to repeat the demonstration. The door was relocked, and in 7 minutes, Hobbs was again able to unlock it. 2 days later, Hobbs began work on the Brahma Precision lock as agreed. Less than a month later, after spending some 50 hours of work, Hobbs opened the lock. A week later, at Brahma's request, Hobbs opened it again. It was the click heard round the world. The committee awarded Hobbs the 200 gold guineas, and Britain's vaunted image of lock-making supremacy ended. The Bank of England itself promptly swapped out Chubb's locks for those of Day & Newell. Lock-picking and lock sport has been a part of the hacker culture since the early days. In the 1940s, while employed on the Manhattan Project, physicist Richard Feynman picked locks for fun, relaxation, and to entertain the other scientists. Notes from the MIT roof and tunnel hacking community were made widely available in 1991 as the MIT Guide to Lockpicking. While lockpicking has been around as long as locks have, Hobbs did bring breaking into something as a means to assess its security into the mainstream. I think part of the reason that lockpicking continues to run so deep in our culture is that it's such an elegant analogy for computer security. Many hacker cons will have a lockpick village as part of the con. At DEF CON in 2019 in Planet Hollywood, I watched as Congressman Ted Lieu picked his first lock. Like everyone who has done so before him, there was a moment of realization. But I then explained to him that the reason he was able to do what he did was due to leveraging very small manufacturing defects, and this is exactly how more impactful software exploits work, leveraging extremely small defects into complete system ownership. These defects, errors, or bugs are almost impossible to avoid in very complex software with millions of lines of code, and that is why exploitation is possible and maybe always will be. It's 1903, back at the Royal Institution in London. Marconi is preparing to demonstrate the sending of secure Morse code wirelessly from 300 miles away in Cornwall, UK. Present before the assembled crowd is Marconi's assistant, physicist John Ambrose Fleming. Marconi had claimed, "I can tune my instruments so that no other instrument that is not similarly tuned can tap my messages." Moments before the demonstration was to begin, the hush of the crowd was interrupted by what might have been some kind of interference, but was soon recognized by Fleming's assistant as a Morse code message repeated over and over again. It spelled a single word, rats. Then it changed to a short poem. There was a young fellow of Italy who diddled the public quite prettily. It was followed by further rude epithets. The demo had been hacked. The stream of invective stopped before Marconi's demo began, but the damage was done. If someone could intrude on the demo, the technology was clearly not as secure as was being claimed, and it was likely that an attacker could both send false messages and intercept private ones. Fleming sent a letter to the Times of London. He called the hack scientific hooliganism and an outrage against the traditions of the Royal Institution. He asked the newspaper's readers to help him find the culprit. 4 days later, the Times printed a letter from Neville Maskelyne, a British magician, who took credit for the hack and said he did it for the lulz. Marconi had patented a technology for tuning a wireless transmitter to broadcast on a specific wavelength. According to Marconi, this meant that confidential channels could be set up. We now know that isn't true, but at the time, it wasn't as obvious. Maskelyne highlighted the technology's security flaws by showing that interception and interference were possible. He threw a shmoo at Marconi. Wireless hacking remains an important part of our community. Faraday, Hobbes, and Maskelyne would all be right at home in the hacker community, as would numerous lesser-known people. Hacking predates computers by a long time. If you have ever heard of new math, you have Nicholas Bourbaki to thank. The letter O with a line through it that denotes a null set, that was Nicholas Bourbaki. Over a span of 30 years, starting in 1940, Nicholas Bourbaki authored a series of math textbooks and numerous journal articles which provided key contributions and insights on a broad range of math topics. The work was both comprehensive and rigorous, but Nicholas Bourbaki never existed. France, 1934. World War I has wiped out a generation of European intellectuals. In Germany, intellectuals were protected from serving at the front. But in egalitarian France, intellectuals were not given any special treatment. The mathematics community recognized that outdated textbooks needed to be updated. This would be an enormous task. Andre Weil proposed to a group of colleagues that they meet regularly in person to update the texts. The collective named itself Nicholas Bourbaki, since at the time, a full name would be required to publish. They agreed that unanimous consent will be required before the group publishes any material. The meetings were frequently heated and confrontational. Multiple people would be yelling at the same time. The members knew that to accomplish the task of updating the mathematics, they would need to leverage in-person meetings. While there were always disagreements, their culture of humor and their belief in the importance of their collective work allowed the group to build a community around sustaining the effort and continuing to produce impactful work for decades. Membership evolved over time, but the work and the culture persisted. The Bourbaki Collective was incredibly prolific. and knew that they would be more effective working together. Meetings were always held in person. Our hacker community maintains a culture of in-person meetings. We meet, share, argue with, challenge, and support each other at cons like this one. Meeting in person, breaking bread, getting to know each other, and supporting our incredibly diverse community helps us continue to be prolific and generate impactful work together. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology has a long tradition of doing hacks. At MIT, a hack is a prank or a practical joke that demonstrates some particular cleverness or technical ability. MIT hackers include Nobel laureates George Smoot and Richard Feynman, the same physicist educator Feynman that I mentioned picked locks earlier. Oddly, George Smoot is not the Smoot used to measure the Harvard Bridge. That was fraternity pledge Oliver Smoot. The hacks are not sanctioned by the university. The hacks are frequently temporary installations or performance art. Often they commemorate an anniversary or a special event. But there is an informal code of conduct, which was written in an MIT blog. Be subtle. Don't leave evidence that you were there. Always leave things as you found them, or better. Leave no permanent damage, both during hacks and while hacking. Don't steal anything. If you must borrow something, always return it, and perhaps leave a note saying when it will be returned. Brute force is the last resort of the incompetent. Never hack alone. And above all, exercise common sense. Here is a video of one MIT hack that I think you'll relate to. There are others online.
Suddenly it happened. A balloon with MIT written all over it popped out of the turf at the 46-yard line and grew and grew and grew. The questions of why, who, and how, all answered here tonight at Delta Kappa Epsilon at MIT.
The first attempt at a Harvard-Yale game hack was made by the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity exactly 34 years ago Saturday. The machine was built by alumni over the past several years.
And so it all came out, the questions answered.
A Freon-driven hydraulic press and a vacuum cleaner motor were used to inflate the balloon. 8 trips to the field were made between the hours of 1:30 and 5 a.m. Security patterns were established every evening. Wire was laid in during 2 to 3 weeks. The machine was laid in Tuesday, November 16th, the week of the game. Power was drawn from an isolated stadium circuit which controlled only the field irrigation system. Safety was ensured for all people involved at all times.
The question is, why did you do it?
We just do it because it's there. We were there to hack the stadium, and we did it for the fun of it.
The Raiders of Deke House had a big play up their sleeve, and their game plan was too complex for ordinary chalkboards.
I took 8 nights. Each night, 1 or 2 of us had to go in first to scout out, make sure they didn't have any guards.
We all came in army fatigues every night.
The last night, everything was working well. All the wiring was in. We put the machine in a hole, covered all the empty spaces up with dirt, put the sod on, and just hoped it wouldn't get seen.
Delta Kappa Epsilon of MIT built, plotted, buried, and triggered the balloon hard on Saturday, pulling off the greatest hack in Harvard, Yale, MIT history.
As detailed in Stephen Levy's book, Hackers, which I highly recommend, in the early 60s, a group of undergraduates and professors coalesced around some of the new computers just being introduced at the MIT Computation Center and Research Laboratory of Electronics in Building 26, the TX0, PDP-1, PDP-6, and PDP-10. The group included some of the earliest computing pioneers, and they built on the hacking culture that already existed at MIT. They would use the term hack to refer to a particularly elegant solution to a problem or a version of code that was the simplest or shortest. They were hackers who mastered the technology, and they despised bureaucracies that tried to control access to the computers. A hacker ethic was born. It wasn't written down or argued and agreed upon, it just materialized. Some of the elements included: access to computers should be universal and unlimited. Information should be free and shared. Mistrust authority, promote decentralization. Hackers should be judged by their hacking, not bogus criteria such as degrees, age, race, or position. Lock hacking was already an MIT tradition, but to the Building 26 hackers, lock hacking was a statement. To hackers who felt that access to tools needed to be free, a lock was a challenge. As administrators stepped up their game to secure tools and access, so too did the hackers. It was warfare. But access was never used to damage or steal. Often hackers would leave a note that they borrowed something as had been part of the MIT code earlier. Some of the administrators eventually resolved the issue by agreeing to allow the hackers to bypass locks as long as they didn't flaunt it. Sort of, don't ask, don't tell. Don't abuse your access and make me look bad, and we can both understand that you're going to do what you're going to do. Others ramped up the game by implementing ever-increasing security measures and paid the price. When most people think about game theory, they think about the prisoner's dilemma. The prisoner's dilemma is an example of a game with two players and one move. Each player can either cooperate or defect, and then the game is over. There are versions of the game with iterative moves, which allow the players to reward or penalize each other for previous moves, building or losing trust. But game theory also has simulations involving 0 players and 0 moves. One such simulation is Conway's life. In the game, an initial state is picked, and then the game proceeds. There are no decisions other than the starting position. There are no winners and no losers. It is a simple simulation. For each generation of the game, a cell's status in the next generation is determined by a set of rules. These simple rules are: for a space that is populated, each cell with 1 or fewer neighbors dies, as if by solitude. Each cell with 4 or more neighbors dies, as if by overpopulation. Each cell with 2 or 3 neighbors survives, and for a space that is empty or unpopulated, each cell with 3 neighbors becomes populated. Some initial states will eventually lead to the death of the whole population. Others will generate interesting patterns. The hackers at MIT Building 26, notably Bill Gosper, programmed the game into the PDP-6. They were obsessed with the patterns. They could create models, simulations. They could vary the inputs. They realized they could do science experiments on the computer. The MIT hackers discovered a broad range of patterns within the game: gliders, guns, spaceships, shuttles, oscillators, eaters, beehives, blinkers, traffic lights, etc. One of these, the Gosper glider, will generate a recurring pattern that appears to glide or walk over the grid. Eric S. Raymond has proposed one iteration of the Gosper glider, the one with 3 cells on the bottom row, as a symbol of hacker culture, as the concept was born around the same time as Unix and the internet. You may see this symbol around the con or being worn and displayed by some of your fellow hackers. It is the background on my phone. Now you know why. One question that I and probably others get a lot is, how do we get started in hacking? The Building 26 hackers realized that with the capability to create a simulation, they could experiment and fail fast. They could try thousands or millions of inputs and find optimal outcomes. Today, 3 technologies combined give you the ability to hack safely and fail fast. These are the on-ramp to learning to hack. They are virtualization, Linux, and a scripting language like Python. With these 3 things, you can run hacking experiments, create prototypes, destroy them, and start over, rapidly iterating with almost no cost. If you're looking for a place to start, there it is. So when you see this logo, I want you to remember the Building 26 hackers, the roots of our community. But I also want you to remember that it represents our ability to rapidly innovate, simulate, experiment, model, and discover. Lloyd Blankenship, whose handle is The Mentor, was a member of the second generation of the hacking group Legion of Doom. Lloyd was arrested in 1986 when he was 21 for being in a computer he shouldn't have been in. While in jail, he wrote a short essay for the Frack e-zine titled Conscience of a Hacker, which is also known as the Hacker Manifesto. It is a cornerstone of hacker culture and helps explain the hacker mindset and what it is like to be a hacker. In the essay, the mentor expresses his view of technology as a liberator and a form of personal expression. He talks about the hacker community as being a meritocracy and existing without prejudice. He expresses his disappointment in the public school system and contrasts it with the culture of the hacker community. The essay was quoted in the movie Hackers, and if you haven't read it, you need to do so. During the 70s and 80s, our community communicated on BBSs. The online nature of these communications and the ubiquitous use of handles and pseudonyms obscured and obfuscated an individual's geography, race, ethnicity, sex, or age, and cemented a culture of diversity and meritocracy. As hacker culture has become more popular, the hacker community has grown and spread, and hackerspaces have proliferated. Even during the earliest phases of the community's development at MIT, it was obvious that connecting and working together, being an in-person group, and collaboration were all parts of hacking. Never hack alone was part of the original MIT Hacks code, and it was a lesson that the Bourbaki Collective knew all too well. As the community developed physical spaces such as the Loft, New Hack City, the Walnut Factory, and the Hasty Pastry emerged. They tested various models and design patterns for hackerspace organization and showed great promise and success. They likely inspired hackers in Europe, who also organized additional spaces and applied the hacker ethic. Nick Farr, who others have called the Johnny Appleseed of hackerspaces, had a role in popularizing physical hackerspaces. He started 2 of our local hackerspaces, HackDC and Unallocated Space. Today, there are hundreds of active hackerspaces around the world. You are never far from a physical hackerspace. I encourage you to join and support a hackerspace. And if you find a gap, you can start or organize a hackerspace. Our community does not have any type of formal structure. In fact, having one would go against what we stand for. We do not have membership cards or a hacker organization or a hacker peer review board. There are no hacker rankings or standings, and while certifications exist in the professional information security space, there are no hacker certifications, and nobody tells you who can and cannot be a hacker. In addition to our online networks and physical hackerspaces, our community has developed a broad array of events like this one, at which we can gather and interact. There are monthly meetup groups that attract dozens of people, local and regional conferences that attract hundreds or thousands of attendees, and huge cons that attract tens of thousands annually, like DEF CON. Almost everyone, not everyone attends, but many of us attend multiple cons. And almost everyone who does so will tell you that the best part of the cons are not the talks, the villages, the contests, or the parties, it's the people, our community. We come together, break bread, lobby con, bar con, share, build relationships. Make no mistake, content is important, but it is important because it attracts people and it drives our community forward. I remember my first DEF CON. I was scared. I read the FAQ and figured I might be thrown in the pool or hacked. Even worse, I'd be embarrassed and exposed as an imposter. I talked to a friend who strongly encouraged me to go. I volunteered to help out because I thought that would be a better way to be fully immersed in the experience. What I experienced was life-changing, and many others have had the same feeling. I found my people. I met, in person, people I'd only previously communicated with by email. I told my wife I'm never not going to this con again. It was DEF CON 15, and there were about 7,000 attendees. If you're on the fence about attending DEF CON or another con, let me strongly encourage you to do so. There is a good chance this will change your life. I met some of the old-timers. Some said that DEF CON was too big, and that it wasn't like it used to be back at the Alexis Park. I wished that I'd had the experience that they had in the early days of DEF CON. But longing for a more exclusive experience, I also recognized that what they were describing was a con that didn't include me. Our community is not static. It is growing and evolving, and if you attempt to keep it small and exclusive, you will inevitably make it elitist, be a gatekeeper, and not be inclusive. DEF CON now attracts 25,000 attendees and is still growing. I am thankful that our community has welcomed the newcomers, even as doing so has forced our community to evolve. It's creative destruction. The B-Sides movement, started by Chris Nickerson and promoted by Jack Daniel and others, has dramatically increased the frequency and geography of HackerCons. I have attended numerous B-Sides myself and spoken at more than a few, and been proud to have been involved in organizing and co-chairing B-Sides DC. Reflecting our culture, B-Sides conferences are diverse, independently organized, and grow organically. The words hacking and hackers have been associated with illegal activity. The first published use of the word hack relating to interacting with a machine was in 1955. Students at the Tech Model Railroad Club at MIT were urged to power off before hacking on the electrical system, implying that the hack was understood as a benign action. The first pejorative use of the term was in a 1963 article in MIT's student newspaper, The Tech, describing students who illegally accessed the university's phone system. While some feel that the community should take back ownership of the word and attempt to restore its original meaning, others feel it's a lost cause. Language has always evolved and changed and always will. Vilifying hackers creates news and entertaining, if not realistic, movie plots. It creates fear, uncertainty, and doubt, even if it's not true. And make no mistake, while most of the hacker community subscribes to a code of ethical conduct, there are bad actors who use computers to perform criminal acts. They're called criminals. Groups such as the EFF, Citizen Lab, and I Am the Cavalry have highlighted the important work that hackers in the ethical security community provide to protect our rights. These groups and others do important work to highlight the valuable contributions of the hacker community, reform bad laws, defend those who have been unfairly accused, and decriminalize ethical activities. You can see a progression in hacker culture from the individuals who embodied the hacker mindset to the MIT Hacks Code, to the Building 26 hackers, to the Hacker Manifesto, and the proliferation of our community online through hacker spaces and conferences. These are the building blocks of our hacker culture, our roots. What makes us hackers? To paraphrase the mentor in the Hacker Manifesto, I am a hacker, enter my world. My crime is that of curiosity. We explore, and you call us criminals. We seek after knowledge, and you call us criminals. We exist without skin color, without nationality, and without religious bias. This is our world now, the worlds of the electron and the switch, the beauty of the baud. Hacking is not a set of skills or a fashion statement. It is not black t-shirts or hoodies, though I wear a lot of both. We like to solve puzzles. We are curious. We question everything. Hacking is a mindset. It is critical thinking. It is solving problems in ways not previously anticipated. It is a methodology, and it can be taught. Hacking isn't even all about computer security. It's interesting that a fascination with free access to information and elegant solutions to problem solving has morphed into the fact that many of us are now part of this huge information security industry. That was an evolution of both what we do and the terminology. It has always been about understanding complex systems. Like Michael Faraday, hackers are tenacious. Hacking is sometimes about failure, failing thousands of times, but knowing the difference between failing towards success and just failing. Knowing when to give up and not waste time, and not blow yourself up. And with our recent experiences with the pandemic, we will never again dismiss the importance of our in-person interactions. We're all in this together. Use your time here to meet and talk to your fellow hackers. Never hack alone. Many of you have seen speakers or heard talks and thought, I could do that. I could give this talk. I'm smarter than that person. Many of you are thinking that right now. Don't aspire to be a speaker. Aspire to have something to say. Do research, do critical thinking, experiment, fail, be curious, solve puzzles, have a point, then share it. Like Faraday, pass on what you have learned to others, inspire them. I want to hear what you have to say. Thank you. Any questions? Anyone?
What's your social security number?
Social security numbers should be public, but I'm not going to tell you mine. Anyone else?
Any stories you left out?
There are lots of stories, and again, I really love being part of this community. I've been doing this for 18 years. It's very much a part of who I am, and that was not something that was super obvious that was going to be the case when I started a completely different career. Yeah, like I just love hanging out, and I think one of the benefits that we all have in being part of this community is you can show up anywhere, go to a hackerspace, go to a con, and just go out to dinner with people. And it's like, hi, I'm a hacker. Can I go to dinner with you? And like, sure, like, let's go. They're very opening, very welcoming, very open, and you can all learn and share. And again, I encourage you to do that. I know, by the way, that's not maybe the natural way for many of the people in our community, but I encourage you to take that risk. All right, thanks a lot.